Hello and welcome. Another edition of the Thursday Coaches Corner, sponsored by CorVive Corp, NSF certified supplements. And today we are going to be talking all things Division III baseball, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I thought we would start with a nationally ranked program right here in the heart of New England, located in breathtaking Rhode Island, right on the water. The head coach of Salve, Regina, Coach Eric Cirella. And Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time in season to join me here today.
Thanks for having me. No, it's just great. Had fun the first time, and I'm excited to answer some more questions.
You know, when parents have been absolutely bombarding my emails with questions with regard to Division III baseball, I thought I would start. You know, this is a kind of in the family experience for you, not only as a head coach, but as a son. You took over, you succeeded for your dad, legendary coach at Salve. What has that been like now that you have children of your own and now you're, a head coach, and you obviously followed your dad during his coaching career and coach with your dad? What has that been like for you to take over the helm in, I think it was 2014-ish? What has that been like for you, succeeding your dad and now leading the program forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a great deal of pride because, I went here and took over for him. And, he actually helped coach as an assistant for a number of years, just helping me kind of get it off the ground and helping me with some of the, administrative stuff that people don't always realize that coaches have to deal with, especially Division III coaches that have to deal with pretty much everything. I think it's just a great source of pride to see where the program was and I think where it's going and where it is, to this point.
The school as a whole entered into the NUMAC Athletic Conference, which is arguably one of the toughest Division III conferences in the country. And what has that been like for you as far as schools that you play, recruiting in the area? Talk a little bit about the conference as a whole, some of the schools that are in the NUMAC, and enlighten some of the families that may not be from the general New England area.
Sure. I mean, the NUMAC, it's outstanding, not just baseball, but every sport. Nationally ranked programs, Babson, MIT, Springfield, in football a year ago, I think made it to the final 8 teams in the country or something. Really just a super high academic conference and super challenging with baseball. And I tell people that I think, our first year in the NUMAC was 2024, and we finished 40-10. 5 of our losses that year came against NUMAC teams, and that was a year we went to the World Series. Obviously we lost 2 games in the World Series, finished top 3 or 4 in the country. And I don't think we make it to the World Series if we're not in the NUMAC, because the NUMAC really forces you and challenges you every weekend. With schools like Wheaton, Babson, Coast Guard, Springfield, Clark, WPI. I mean, there's so many good baseball teams that have really, really talented arms on the weekends that can, that are going to beat you if you don't show up and get ready to play.
So right out of the gate, a lot of parents are always going to ask about recruiting and recruiting timelines. So let's just start with the timeline. Talk to me a little bit about the typical recruiting time, as far as when do you engage with a potential high school student athlete that you feel may be a fit for Salve? What are some of the time parameters and timelines that parents and student athletes need to be aware of at the Division III level?
Sure, and it's going to vary slightly with every program, but for us, we're really going to sink our teeth into that recruiting for our next class. Is going to be with the juniors as soon as our season finishes up. Now we have kids that we talk about in the junior class and names that we know based on sophomores from last summer. But typically, as soon as our season ends, which we're hopeful will be end of May, June. If you're playing in June, obviously that's a really good sign. And then, once we get into June, that's when we're jumping right into recruiting season. So it's like, great year. Let's make sure all our equipment is taken care of. Let's make sure the field's in good shape. Okay, now let's go off on the road, and now we want to see, high school playoffs that are really important to us because I think those high school games are really meaningful.
Right.
Unfortunately, in this day and age, and this isn't a knock on summer ball, with travel baseball and stuff, but those games aren't as meaningful. I mean, those are, let's play our 4 or 5 tournament games. Let me get in front of coaches so they can see me perform. I don't think kids are shedding tears over going 0-3 in a tournament or something like that if they had 7 hits. Or some kid, hits 88 on a gun. He's excited about that. He doesn't really care that, unfortunately, that he walked 4 guys and only struck out 2 and his team lost. So that's what coaches are dealing with. But I want to see high school games. We want to see kids, playing rival schools and, competing to win state championships. And then those kids, then now we're going to kind of expand our horizons a little bit and see as many kids as we can with the Super 17s and some of those Flemington tournaments, Diamond Nation, and then everything that happens up here in the Northeast. And typically, like timetable wise, we're going to evaluate from June through September. We're going to have camps starting July. Probably have 4 or 5 prospect camps where, I'll have 3 guys on the road and I'll see somebody that I want my assistants to see, or vice versa. They'll see kids that they want to get in front of us. They want to get them to campus. And kids that are out of region, we might start visits early to mid-July just because they're from New Jersey or New York or Long Island and they're coming up this way for a tournament. So, we'll make an exception and try to get them, in front of us and give them a campus tour and everything, beginning of July, just because it works for their schedule. But I'd say typically the end of July, beginning of August, we just start ramping up visits. And, we're talking maybe 2 or 3 days recruiting a week, and then 4 or 5 days where we have 3 guys on campus. And, it's kind of like a 8 or 9 hour day where we're going to meet with a family, take them around campus, and then we're going to meet with another family, take them around campus, so on and so forth. That's kind of what it looks like. And we'll start getting commitments from our top guys, in August, and that'll trickle all the way into maybe October. I think this year we might have gotten 1 or 2 in November just because we had a need, and that allows you to kind of see your fall team and where guys are. And, if you feel like you have any holes you need to plug in the coming years. But that's essentially, that's the short version of it.
What, Division One, we have this new cap of 34, Division Two cap 36. Division Three, is there a roster cap? Do you implement a cap? Do you have a JV or developmental program? That's another question a lot of parents want to know about the Division Three.
Yeah, so we play JV games. We don't have a roster cap. So typically we're going to be somewhere between 45 and 50, which, allows us to do a few things. It allows us to, really inter squad all fall and continue to do that into the spring, and not have to worry about, do we have enough guys, or am I putting pitchers in the outfield or something like that? Like, we want to compete and play as often as possible because, like I just alluded to a few minutes ago, we have to teach the game of baseball to these guys. And that's, just with talking with a lot of college coaches, that's kind of the same situation that a lot of programs are in, where we're getting more talented athletes than ever before, but they just lack, I guess, baseball IQ. When to throw where, how to do this, how to do that, how to think in certain situations, from top to bottom. So we do keep, 45 to 50, and we'll play JV games, and that will happen in Florida. And we just kind of treat those like, look, there's a certain amount of games a kid can play in. So we treat that like, we have a 40-man roster, and we have spring training games or extra games that we get to play. And I've had years where I took a kid who was going to start in 35 out of 40 games, and I put him in a position in a JV game to see if he could handle it and see how he looked there. One year in Florida, we started a pitcher and said, "Hey, you go out and give us a clean first inning, and you're going to start the next day or 2 days." I think we had an off day, and then you're going to start in 2 days against a pretty good team. And he went out, threw the ball well, 1, 2, 3 inning, and he got the ball and ended up getting a win. 2 days later against a really good program who was in a regional. So. It's not like we're having a JV practice and a varsity practice. Everybody practices together. We develop together, and it's just strategically we use JV games as a tool for to develop, which I think is only beneficial. I mean, the more baseball we can play, the better.
One of the big sources of like conflict, I guess is the proper word, that a lot of families are struggling with is in today's world of the portal, which, as you and I both know, the portal has been around for decades. It's not anything new. It's just more prevalent with regard to social media. But it does elevate top to bottom, every level, every division of college baseball. And obviously Division III is no different. You are a perennial nationally ranked program. As of the time we're recording, you're number 4, I believe, in the country. Could be different today. But talk a little bit about, everybody wants some access to Salve. And what is the role of the portal, and what is the role of the high school athlete, particularly when you finish a season, you sit with your coaches, you address your needs. You obviously in the beginning of June are smack dab in the start of the portal. How does the portal and the high school recruiting process work at Salve?
Sure. Well, I am, we really want to develop guys. So what we're not going to do is we're not going to go into the portal and try to bring 8 or 10 kids in every year and just throw it up against the wall in the fall and see what sticks. I think there's a little bit more of a method to our madness. And typically, I would say we bring in like 2 to 4 kids from the portal a year. And every year, half of those guys are guys that we had recruited previously.
Right.
They decided to go to maybe a higher level or, leave the region or whatever the case is, and realized after a year that they kind of made a mistake, and, we left it on good terms. So I think that's, just another reason why if you're a young coach, you don't want to get too butthurt if a kid doesn't pick your school, because there's so much, things change, finances change with families, kids, they want one thing one day, they want something another day. So you just want to end things on good terms, just so guys, they keep you in the back of their mind, just in case they do make a decision like that. But essentially, we're just looking to plug a hole to continue being ultra competitive. So it might be like, hey, we need a lefty bat, and we need maybe a back end guy, or we need someone who's started college baseball games before, and let's try to find a starting pitcher. And I think that will make our rotation, what it needs to be competitive, and we could still develop all these guys that we're bringing in that are freshmen along the way as well. So it's certainly just a tool to help us rebuild. I'm sorry, not rebuild, but help us reload instead of rebuild. But we still want to give the guys that we recruited opportunities to get on the field as well. So we don't want to overdo it in the portal.
One of the questions that I constantly get is the level of play. What's the disparity between, say, Division III or Division II, Division I? Really, those lines have been what I call permanently blurred. When I was coaching back in dinosaur age at Becker, that no longer even exists, there was a definitive line between talent at Division III and Division I. But in today's world, as we talk 2026, there really is no such animal anymore, particularly when you start to weigh the level of academics in the new MAC, the Babsons, the MITs, the Salves. I mean, we're talking big boy academics, and that's going to obviously attract extremely talented athletes. So can you kind of give an idea of, is there much talent separation these days between, like, say, Salve and Brown, Salve and BC, Salve and UConn? And what does the high school athlete have to do to truly be ready when their feet hit campus at Salve?
Sure. Well, a lot of good questions there that I want to kind of unpack. I was on a podcast a couple months ago, and because I coached at URI from 2007 to 2012, and in my opinion, in those 6 years, we were the number one ranked team in New England for Division I programs twice. We had a year where we had like 4 or 5 guys drafted. And if they used the current RPI model or whatever, we would have had an at-large bid in 2009 just because we were like 37 and 18 or something. The teams that I have now would compete with that team. So I think the top Division III teams in the country, maybe let's call it the top third of the country for Division III baseball, would be like 15 years ago mid-major baseball in Division I.
Right.
Nowadays, what you see a lot of, especially because of COVID, you saw all the top players at, Salve, Endicott, Wheaton, Tufts, all these top tier programs, Eastern Connecticut, go on and flourish at Division I levels. Some of them pretty high levels as well. So do I think that like a Division III school can just go out and beat a Division I? Yeah, I do, because it's baseball. But the Division I program's obviously going to have a little bit more depth. They're going to have guys on their bench that are better than the guys on the opposing team's bench. But every year you see a Division III team play a Division I team, and the Division I team loses. A year ago, Husson beat University of Maine. There was a school in, I don't know, it's California or Washington. It was like Washington State lost to Pacific Lutheran or something like that. It happens. So the lines are just getting closer and closer, and has a lot to do with the ability to keep a little bit bigger of a roster and develop guys, because practice is going to look a lot different if you or I are coaching a team of 34 kids as opposed to coaching a team of 50 kids. I mean, the team of 50 kids has a lot more they can do and a lot more, baseball activity, and we can practice a lot harder and do things just because we have a little bit more depth. If so-and-so gets sore, or so-and-so bangs his knee, or so-and-so twists his ankle or something like that, we can kind of plug and play because we have a little bit more of an option than that team that has 34 that kind of has to, just take it a little bit easier because you don't have as many options.
Right. And talk a little bit from a physicality perspective or a skill set perspective, because you touched on a topic that I hear time and time again. Doesn't matter the level, doesn't matter the division. Baseball IQ, baseball intellect, instincts. But from a physicality and skill set perspective, what can a high school athlete really do to truly be prepared to compete with some of those upperclassmen, those older student athletes, particularly at a Salve, when you're talking about a high level, high caliber program?
That's the biggest thing that separates freshmen and sophomores. Are the freshmen stepping on campus, are they physically ready to compete at the college level? And so, I mean, just making sure that you can do the team lifts to the best of your ability, you're putting on weight, and not just putting on weight, but you're maintaining mobility with your hips and maintaining shoulder mobility and strength and all this stuff. Like, just getting strong and stiff is not going to do it. You have to be stronger, faster, more explosive than ever before. And so, just something to hit on too is like when we're recruiting kids, there's nothing more unattractive to a coach than seeing a kid with a bad body, because like, look, I get it. I'm 43 now, and I'm not, as blessed as I once was. If I cheat for a couple weeks, I notice it in my face, I notice it in my body. But when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, there's no excuse to not be in the best shape of your life. So if you want to get crossed off, that's the easiest way, is just, your body is a billboard. So you need to make sure that that excites coaches when they look at you. And that might just be, look, there's a ton of kids that we recruit, and some of the best ones, Walter, are he hasn't been able to put on weight because he hasn't stopped growing. That's fine. Those kids usually they fall right through the cracks at Division I schools, and if guys at our level do their job the right way, they realize, like, hey, this kid has a tremendous upside, and if we just get him here in our program and we teach him how to eat the right way and so on and so forth, he's going to be a monster in a couple of years. That was the same thing with Dom Parachi. I mean, Dom had a hard time putting on weight, and but here's a kid who's low 80s. He could spin it. He was a winner. He threw strikes. He's 6'3", whatever. And now I'm watching him warm up for Altoona, and his thighs are tree trunks. He wasn't like that 6, 7, 8 years ago because he didn't stop growing, and he was a 3-sport athlete. So there's always an exception to the rule. I was the same way. I didn't stop growing until I got to college, and then I was able to put on weight, and that's fine. That's fine. But it's guys who haven't grown an inch since their sophomore year who, are you going to do something with your body? Or are you okay with that? Those aren't the guys that excite us, and those are the kids we're trying to avoid because, let's face it. I mean, you got to get out of bed, and you typically have to piss excellence in everything that you do in the classroom, with your diet, with how you act, with how you interact with your family, your friends. There's no days off. We just want to stack days. And so I think it's important to get that message across. And that's what we talk about a lot with the recruiting process with guys is, just getting out of bed and competing in everything that you do every single day.
A lot of times parents will get kind of hung up on Division III doesn't do scholarships. There's not a lot of scholarship, but Division III, merit money, grant money, there's a multitude of different aid packages that Division III puts together. Can you explain to families that the average Division III school on merit alone is probably giving back anywhere from 30 to as much as 50% in some cases, but talk a little bit about academics, the role they play with regard to scholarship or merit money, and also how you go about or how you approach the FAFSA and the financial side of being a Division III athlete.
Sure. I'd say on average, about whatever you see for tuition, if you're a good student and you're not, in that top 2 or 3%, of income brackets or whatever in the country, you're probably going to get about 50% taken care of. So, on average, I think at Salve, on average, it might say, tuition, room, board, 75. On average, you're looking at like 28 to 35, depending on how much academic money you get. Some of our higher academic packages are in the $30,000 to $35,000 range. So just for being a great student, doing well on your SATs, it's SAT optional, but, SATs and ACTs can only help. Stuff like that, is going to get you 30 grand off the top. And then you apply for your financial aid, which that package will typically come in. You'll be able to get a read in the summertime, but the actual, like, this is the offer, this is what it's going to look like, that's normally middle of December, end of December, when it's all said and done. And again, like I said, the typical kid here is going to pay like 30 to 35, but some are going to be lower, some are going to be in the mid to upper 20s, just based on what your income bracket is. And there's always little scholarships here. Your dad was a police officer, your mom was a teacher, you're a first generation college student. So, we're always looking for ways to, get you an extra couple grand here. And I think that's, part on us to lead you down that road, but also part on the student athlete and the parents to just kind of investigate different things, because there's a lot of options out there that just go, I guess, unchecked because nobody looks at them.
Yeah, and I always, when I'm working with parents, I always tell them, here's what we're going to explore. We're going to explore from the local, Knights of Columbus all the way in through your school might have a random scholarship in the major academic area of interest you're going to pursue at a school like Salve. Final question that I think a lot of parents truly want to understand is, okay, I love everything that Coach Cirella is telling me, and I want to apply to Salve. How are they going to get on your radar, prior to the camps in July? How do they get on your radar? Are they sending you an email with a transcript and a video? Are they DMing you on social media? How are they going to get access to Salve, whether it's you directly or your staff, to at least get on your radar from a recruiting perspective?
Sure. I think it's filling out a prospect form, and you can email us all you want. We're gonna keep them. I have a hard time in the season doing too much recruiting and focusing on the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 games we have this week, and like what our current needs are. So I'm gonna definitely log everything, and when the season ends, then I'm gonna start to just hit the ground running and do my homework and really watch some video and dig in and stuff like that. But it's nothing elaborate. Just a typical highlight video with some stuff and some metrics, some skills, some what you want to major in. Sometimes kids say, "Oh, I want to major in engineering." Well, we don't really have that program, so you should probably look at WPI or MIT or something like that. But I think I hope kids don't get turned off, because I want to focus. Like when you're here and you're in the program, I want to focus my attention on the guys that are here, and then when the season wraps up, then I'm going to focus my attention on what we need to do for the future, and that's recruiting. So that's when there's going to be a lot more dialogue, and we're going to start responding to emails with what's your schedule like at this tournament, when are you pitching, we'd love to see you at camp, and I'm going to call a bunch of summer coaches and talk to them and get their opinion on you. So and if I know your high school coach, I'm going to call him too, because I still think that's the purest form of recruiting. Is how are you in high school? Well, what are some of the best kids we've gotten are guys that I know, a teacher at that school or a guidance counselor or an athletic director, and they think the world of you, and that's really what we want, is those type of kids.
Well, I want to let parents know two things. First of all, if you ever take the time to visit Salve, Regina, you will be blown away. It's probably in the top 10 most beautiful campuses in the country, any level of college. And also, with regard to the caliber of baseball, Salve, Regina has an elite college staff of mentors, of great family men, great mentors, elite baseball men. And I encourage all families, regardless of where you are across the country, Salve should be on your list if you're really seeking elite academics and athletics, a great blend. And Eric, best of luck to finish the season, the regionals, and hopefully you end in a World Series. I really appreciate you taking the time here today, Eric.
Thanks for having me on, and appreciate everything you do for student athletes and families and stuff like that.
I appreciate it, Eric. Thank you.